Please,
Hi,
give her a
Vito.
applause. Hi, Petrina. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Wow, the Grand Sphere is quite something, isn't it?
I love it. I'm sure you love it. Should we get started?
We should.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us in person and virtually. As Vito mentioned, this is a panel discussion about performance and innovation, and Canada really is a nation of innovators, you know, dating back to the discovery of insulin and IMAX films. We are at the top of the game. And this next panel, I know that you are going to love, because these four panelists are really visionaries. They are top performers, and they are leaders, and they are going to give us a glimpse in, you know, our future. So I want to start off introducing them to the stage. Please welcome first off Jason Battersby. He is the Audi design team member and a man who had a hand in this beautiful Grand Sphere concept car, and a fellow Canadian. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Marnie Mcbean. She is a decorated Olympian, a woman that has, you know, 10 medals to her name, 3 gold medals, was chef de mission back in 2020 with the Tokyo Olympics. Welcome, Marnie. And next, we have Chris Hadfield, world-renowned astronaut, military pilot, author, engineer, and a musician on the side who entertained us all the way from space. And last but not least is Valérie Limoges. She is a racing queen and just won an international series in Canada, the only female to do so. So welcome, Valérie, to the stage. Please, have a seat. Chris, I wanted to open the discussion with you because, you know, at a very young age, at the age of 9, you knew you wanted to be an astronaut when most people don't even know what they want to do in their 20s. You know, so what sparked your passion?
Thanks for asking. Nice to see everybody here live and online. When I was a little kid, I started with comic books, because they just seem so different than my life. All these colors and shapes and gigantic personalities and people. And then I started reading science fiction, which sort of brought those comic books to life. And then Star Trek came on TV, which was just like, holy cow, you know, Kirk and Uhura and exploring the whole universe. And so as a little kid, I had this vision of things that they weren't real, but things that just might be. But what really tipped it over was then people actually started doing what I had been fantasizing about. People started actually flying in space. You know, I was born before the very first person even rode a rocket to space, so it's all younger than I am. And what really like turned the key for me was when I was 9 years old. And I don't know where you were when you were 9, but your value system is so much built on the influences. You start to become aware of the world. And so many Olympians that I've talked to, something they saw, something that happened at 9 or 10. And for me, just when I was turning 10 years old is when the first 2 people walked on the moon. And I just thought, if they can perform at that level, if they can turn themselves from just regular people into someone who can walk on the moon, then that's just like huge permission for me to try and start shaping my own life. So I'm just a very lucky recipient of a lot of great outside influences.
Marnie, did you have an aha moment like that as well?
Well, it made me laugh because my inspiration to want to go to the Olympics was watching the closing ceremony party in LA, and they were all just dancing around on the field, and I was like, I want to go to a party like that. And then I just had to figure out what sport I wanted to do. But there also was a rocket, like a guy in a rocket pack who said, see you at the next Olympics. And I was like, okay. So yeah, just sometimes you just need someone to invite you, and you're like, all right. Young and dumb is kind of ideal.
Valérie, what about you? What sparked your interest in racing?
Pretty much same story. I started racing pretty young, and I remember watching the race with my dad on TV. And he decided to brought me to a karting track, and this is how it all started.
And Jason, I mean, there aren't many Canadian auto designers that have made it to the top of the game at such a young age. You know, what was the secret to your success?
Well, definitely knowing the goal and having a really clear vision of what I wanted to do. I was drawing cars since I was 5 years old. I was just totally immersed in wanting to do something with cars, wanting to be creative. And it was just clear, I want to draw cars and I want to build cars. And
Do you still have any of those drawings?
I do, my parents do, absolutely. So, and that just drove me all the way forward. So never looking and never straying from the goal.
And now there's certainly some challenges along the way. I mean, Marnie, you were chef de mission in a time of a global pandemic. You know, how did you react to change? Because that's, you know, a very important thing as we're going through complex change that you have no control over.
Yep. So going to Tokyo, and the chef de mission, so that made me the head of delegation for Team Canada. And the Tokyo Olympics were my 10th Olympic Games that I was going to go to. I'd been to 3 as an athlete. And I remember in counseling athletes, for the longest time, I often described my role, I was a specialist in Olympic athlete preparation and mentoring. And it's a cool title, but I actually liked, I was the captain of swagger for the Canadian team. And the goal was to help Canadian athletes get to the Olympics and to the Olympic environment with all the confidence that they would have in their home environment. So when you're at home drawing those pictures, when you're at home dreaming, like when you get to the next step, how do you keep that like, oh sure, I'm like curious, why wouldn't I try? And so that was what I was doing as the captain of swagger. And in having these conversations with athletes, I always said that, you know, going to the Olympics, you need to have a plan. But you always need to know that it's not going to go according to plan A. It's going to probably, you need to have plan B and C. And as we trained and prepared for the 2020 Olympics, which actually happened in 2021, right? We had a full year delay. The key was for us to be agile and to know that, you know, perfection is worth trying for, but it's also a bit of a myth because every time we get close to it, it's going to change. And we had all of these wonderful plans that got garbaged, right, over the last 2 years. And the truth is, it's not the end of it, right? We're not in a, you know, it's not a crisis anymore. The pandemic's here. There's always going to be things that make our goals harder to get to. There's no through path. So with Team Canada, the way we got there is that we just worked on this idea of resilience. We changed to making sure we're creatively adapting. And even Chris spoke to us, and he was like, you know, you've got to work on keeping the things that you're accomplishing so you feel that you have inertia forward. So when you have these big goals as a kid and you know exactly what you want to do, you also sort of have to forget about it and work on the little steps that move you in there. Because if I'm sitting there thinking about an Olympic gold medal, it's going to like freeze me out. But if I'm thinking about the way forward, the way for me to close the gap and the way for Team Canada to close the gap and come up with new goals and new plans, the goals didn't change, was to just take one step forward. Sometimes it's the tiniest step forward, and we get inertia, we get momentum, and that's how we kind of kept going. And we got to Tokyo a year later than we planned, and did better than we could have ever hoped.
But when you're competing as an athlete and even, you know, as a race car driver too, every second counts. Like I think you won a race by 0.04 seconds. How do you improve upon performance? Valerie, do you want to tackle that or Marnie?
Well, that's a tough question to answer, but in racing world, like it's not only me, I have to rely on the car and the mechanic. So all the adjustment, because at a certain level, you're at your max pretty much. So you still have some work to do here and there to tweak, but it's more with the car setup and the mechanic. So obviously, like if you want to gain like a tenth or two of a second, it's pretty. It seems like it's nothing for everybody else, but in the racing world, after 40 minutes of race, you're going to be like half a lap down if you are like 0.2 of a second too slow every lap. So we make adjustment and we can find like the perfect tuning to make you go quicker all the time.
How quickly can you tell? Like when you get in the car, I've always wondered this watching professional racers, and they've tuned it to the best of their ability, but then you're out there and now you're the one judging it. How soon can you tell that either they've got it just right or something's wrong?
Good driver can tell you in like 2-3 corners. Yeah. But I still work on that because it's pretty tough sometimes. If it rains, something like that, you feel less of the car and the asphalt. How is it rough, like the speed bump and everything. But like, yeah, it takes like a lap and you have to know, unless it's just waste of time. Like we have some practice test during the race weekend, but you need to know like pretty quickly, unless it's just a waste of time. You need to find the perfect setup to make it work all the weekend.
And then how much do you have to have like faith in your plan, right? Like your plan is to get around all the laps as fast as you can, not just the first one.
Yeah.
So if you know you're like on your limit, but someone's in front of you, how do you know like this is someone I can let that go because I've got faith in the whole plan, or can you just never let it go? Like
No, I don't.
Yeah.
No, because you never know what can happen. Like there could be a crash, and then we go under yellow, and everybody will follow each other. And then when the crash is clear of the track, then they let you go again. So you sometimes like they have a little bit of advantage, but then when there's something happening on the track and there's a yellow flag, then we all bunch up together and we start again. So like you need to be like. Everything counts on the racetrack. The race is too short. Well, it's pretty much like you. You only have one chance.
yeah, I'm never going to take it off, but like I'm 5'10", and sometimes I was racing against, I will say this respectfully, like these 6'4" gorillas, right? And they're going to beat me if my race is like only 2K. But
Yeah.
it's really, really hard, just so you know. And so, but in 500 meters, like someone who's got more power might take me off the line.
Yeah.
But I have to have patience in that I've come up with a plan for the whole race. Yeah. And then I kind of reel them in, and I love taking them down. I love taking down the gorillas.
Jason,
Yeah.
I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I
too.
just wanted to piggyback off the relationship between maybe driver and mechanic, and that you're never alone, right? You have somebody that's going to help you adjust, even if you already know what you would adjust. Yeah. And I think in design it's a little bit the same, that I'm never alone on a team doing something like the Grand Sphere. We're a big team, and there's key members there that you know who've done this many more times than me, give you that feedback, readjust, especially when it comes to creativity. Where do you pull that creativity from? There's always going to be somebody that's been there before, that's made those mistakes, and they're going to guide you.
And I guess it's the same in the International Space Station, right? You have a team behind you at home.
Yeah, people probably know about mission control in Houston, but there's also mission control here, just over in Saint-Hubert. There's mission control in Munich. There's mission control in Moscow, and mission control in Tokyo, or just outside of Tokyo. And you know, I'm commanding the International Space Station, but all of those people have a huge responsibility and a vested interest in what's happening. So the way I approach it is, how are we all going to win? How are we going to move this thing forward so that we can win today or win this week? How can we reach a new level of science experiments or defeat a problem? And then once we understand what we're trying to get to, then how can this is about the size of a spaceship crew. How can I give each of my crew members a clear enough definition of success, and then the skills that they need to make sure that each of us can do our part? Huge responsibility, and also with very high stakes. But then the last piece is, as the other folks are saying, all of the mechanics back on Earth who are really taking care of all the details and doing all the work that needs doing. So it's a big task every single day. And the feeling of success and pride, though, you know what it's like when you take the lead, or, you know, all of you have had that feeling of, man, I'm really on to something here. Like you're surfing and you catch one of those waves where, holy cow, I'm going to really go a long way on this one. That feeling, even with a small group of humans off the planet, by working together as a whole group of people, you can get a feeling of catching that momentum. And I just don't know any feeling that's better than that.
Is it mixed emotions, though? Like if you're at an Olympic game and you come in fourth, you don't make the podium. What must be going through your mind if you've just narrowly missed it? Are you disappointed in yourself, or are you happy that you've made it here?
Yeah, well, I know we've talked about this, so I'll get there, but no, there's no mixed emotions when you come fourth. When you come fourth at that moment, you're just really gutted. and I tried really hard not to swear right there and put out like, you know, there's a lot of really real emotions that come in that moment. And then I think as leadership and with everyone else and with maturity within your career, you have to see in the presence of ambition, I think there's almost always two emotions there. So if you come fourth, almost always you're going to be disappointed unless it's the best you've ever done. So the first time I was fourth, I was super happy with it because I was like, oh my gosh, Canada has never done this well before. But the second time I was fourth, I was really angry. And I was just timing how much I was off. For a whole year, I was like 0.96, 0.96, 0.96. Like that really sucked. But the thing is, I think the presence of ambition requires us, even when we win, to want more, right? So even when, like I said earlier, like perfection is this thing worth trying for. When you get there, if you're ambitious about it, like when you design the car of your dreams, you know, the vehicle of your dreams, as soon as you look at it, you're going to know exactly what you want to do next time, right? Like it's...
Yeah, it's a trigger. Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like there's no end to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I know people, like, I used to have, like, I wanted to title my book, the Jammed Cat Theory of Performance, because I've actually solved perpetual motion issues. Like if you take a cat and you drop it, it'll always land on its feet. But if you're eating...
Not on a spaceship.
No,
But otherwise...
it doesn't land. There you go. And then, that's a good one. And then, but if you have your piece of toast with jam on it and you drop it, except on a spaceship, it's going to land jam side down. So I wondered if you put jam on the back of a cat, will it ever land? No, it's just perpetual motion of feet. And I think the jam is the ambition we apply to our goal, which is the cat. We always want more, and we're always spinning to do and try and learn and to achieve more. So it doesn't matter if you're fourth or third or second or first or 17th. You're going to come with a sense of, eventually, you'll come to the fact that I did a lot of hard work and I'm proud of that, and I want to do more, and I believe in more, and that's the joy of ambition. And when you're like good with your goals, you don't care anymore, you're like, gosh, that was good. And the cat lands, and you go and you figure something else to put your jam on, and you just kind of go from there.
Is ambition something that you're born with, or is it something that you develop over the years?
Can you tell us that? I'd love to know that one. I think you might find it,
Yeah.
right? Because you won't have it for everything. So, you know, people come up to me and they're like, you know, their parents trying to figure out what parents should do, what people should do is just try lots of things. I think everybody's excellent at something, and it's the lucky few who find what that is. So we try things until we find where we want to, like, oh, I know where I want to put my ambition today.
Now, Jason, I want to talk about your role as a designer, because you are looking at cars so far advanced. I'm sure you're designing cars for like 2027, 28. How do you design for vehicles like that when technology is changing so quickly?
We really have to think about the user and what we envision the user is going to want or need, or the way the cities are evolving, or the way the communities are evolving, and the range of the vehicles are evolving. So all of these things that we can imagine pretty clearly how they could be, and that's going to definitely drive what happens with the functions, and then what happens with the shape of the car, and how big the interior needs to be, or how big of a volume or how big of a footprint the car has. So we can project and we can make those mistakes really far in advance, even if the tech isn't there, or even if the tech that we've projected isn't going to come. But it's still going to trigger something else. The technology's going to grow rapidly. Maybe we can position it in another way, right? So there's opening just so many opportunities for us as designers to be creative.
And what's the role of innovation when it comes to performance? Valerie, do you want to tackle that?
Well, it's pretty much the same thing for us. I mean, all the race car, they improve, new series, new car manufacturer that gets involved in the different categories. But yeah, they always try to find like what needs to be done on a race car. Is it performance, like suspension, all the adjustment, all the computer that comes inside. So I'm not very technical about that because I'm not engineer or anything like that, but I know they always try to come up with something that's going to get the car faster because we're racing, so obviously it's to go fast at the end of the day.
cool to picture that right now, if you line up the sun and the earth and go like 1,000,000 kilometers or so beyond the earth, there's a human creation out there that Canada had a big part of, the James Webb Space Telescope. And that's right on the edge of impossible. We can get together, just like a group of people, not even all that many people, and build a thing that now collectively we can put way out in the darkness of space, and it is turning and not only showing us beautiful pictures from the universe, but using the Canadian system that points it, and another Canadian-built sensor, it is spotted and looked at a planet that is orbiting another star, and actually looked at the atmosphere of a planet orbiting another star. And to think that all we had to do was imagine something audacious, challenge ourselves with something crazy, and then organize. Without that challenge, driving around on Mars, there's a little bit that was built on Vancouver Island being drilled down into the rock to see if we can find any fossils on Mars or not, to answer one of the fundamental questions of whether we're alone in the universe or not. Unless you give yourself that audacious, challenging goal, then progress is not going to happen. It's when you recognize, hey, there's more than just what we're doing today. Let's try and see what we can collectively do differently. And to be able to understand whether we're alone in the universe or not, or to be able to understand what is the natural cycle of a planet like Earth, that only comes from imagining the impossible and then trying to organize ourselves to make that part of current day reality.
Well, and it's interesting to see all the changes that we've seen, especially in your industry. I mean, what do you think of, Bezos and Elon Musk and, space tourism and William Shatner going up? I think
it is great that a little kid from Montreal got to fly in space, that Bill Shatner. He had to wait till he was 90.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you have had the chance to listen to William Shatner just after he landed and walked out, and that was just like a tiny little taste of space flight. They just got to the bottom of space, a few minutes of weightlessness and then back. But he just wrote a big article in the paper as well. It profoundly changed his perception of Earth and its place in the universe. And if you can take a pretty crusty person, a 90-year-old who's kind of seen everything and been everywhere, and shift his worldview because we challenge ourselves with a new technology, we make it simple and safe enough that now we can actually take up someone who doesn't have to fly the ship and allow them to change their worldview. That's where we are kind of in the history of space technology right now, as well as, living on the spaceship and exploring the universe. But that fundamental human ability to see our own planet for what it truly is, to me, that's a moment in history, and it's only going to increase as we figure it out from here forward. So I find it pretty exciting.
I agree.
I think, it's hard to, follow talking about the broadness that the James Webb can look at. When, at the Olympic level, we're trying to get like hundredths of a second faster in every 4 years, right? We know Olympic performances improve every 4 years, but the innovation that we're having isn't, we need it to come from design. We need it to come from, thinking big and believing that we can go faster, but we also need to innovate how we get more from the human body. And if I look at sport over the last 10 years, I think our biggest innovations have been in recovery, not actually in, how we get energy, but how we save energy. So this is kind of, I guess this is kind of like coming up with how do we make our cars go further, how to make the batteries last longer. But the biggest innovations have been on nutrition and rest and recovery and sleep studies, and how do we get athletes to be able to train harder and do more, and certainly I love the Canadian and most athletes that are doing it right at the Olympic level are like, it's not a pharmacology. If we wanted to go to pharmacology, that's a whole new level of innovation, but it's not healthy, right? So we have to figure out these healthy ways, and sometimes it is sleep, and it is nutrition, and the innovations of how we train harder also open up our brains so how we can do more. And so that's where all the speed is coming from now. It's this, it's innovation is not just one thing, it's the whole team.
Yeah, just to talk about that innovation, or you said the shift of training has changed the way the athletes are building their bodies. And for example, 10 years ago, we would have just concentrated purely on the shape of the car. As an exterior designer, I would have just been purely concentrating on drawing something that looks good and bringing that forward. But now I'm even at my level being asked about, think about the materials, think about sustainable materials, think about is this going to be recycled or not, or is this going to use the technology in the best way possible or not? So 10 years ago, again, we would have never talked that way, but with the Grand Sphere, with things like these concept cars, we propose that those sustainable materials can elevate the product and not detract from the performance.
We both probably care about good weight, right? Like
Yes.
the weight that makes you stronger, the weight that doesn't make you heavier,
Yes.
but if you're too light, you're not strong.
Still want to be fast in a car.
Well, how do you design for a future that is electric?
It's a broad one, but we know that that's the direction we're going. So we're confident that the technology is going to allow us to be more flexible, and we just want to be able to contribute to those flexibilities. And again, if we're dreaming up these challenges, the technology and the challenge is going to go hand in hand, and we're just lucky enough to be able to bridge all those together. Yeah.
But does it give you more freedom? Because now you don't have an internal combustion engine, you don't
Absolutely. I mean, there's I don't want to say limitless, but I mean, we can really be much more creative in the way that we structure the vehicle than in the past.
And Valerie, how has innovation changed, the racing industry?
Excuse me?
How has innovation changed the racing industry?
Well, for me, it always depends like which series you race. I mean, there's like the more regional stuff, there's more like high caliber stuff. So of course, if you go like to over the US or even some races in Canada where the technology involved is improving every year, like everything else, like a car or something like that. But yeah, people are working day and night to make them faster, safer at the same time, because we want to go fast, but it needs to be safe at the end of the day if you want to come back home at night. So all kind of stuff like that.
Is it harder as a woman being a race car driver in a male-dominated role? Are you seeing that change over the years since you've been racing?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I started at such an early age. I was only 12 years old when I started. And racing is a small world, so I keep seeing the same person all over and all over. So to me, I was accepted because I had some good result, I guess, because I was proving that I have my place in the world-dominated sport. So I never felt like I was a side, and I didn't want that, obviously. But still today, like I see people from 20-something years ago, and they're still my friends. So yeah, I'm pretty lucky because the result always talk. Like if I would maybe have not as good result, then they would say, "Oh, what is she doing here?" But since the result talks to themselves, I guess I got accepted. But I wish we can have some more women in any sport because it's pretty limited. But there is more. Like when I started, there was almost none. Now we see more, but obviously it's not 50-50. So
they just did a thing for the 72 hockey series, and they took some modern athletes and had them compete and play some hockey wearing the equipment that was like the 72, and I'm gonna guess, so the equipment for you guys, so whether like the helmet and even the gear that you wear, the telemetry equipment that you have, but I'm wondering, does it come in your size? Because that was one of the things in space, right?
It's custom made actually. Yeah, so it's pretty comfortable, like it's lighter than a racing suit is much lighter, and obviously a fireproof. So yeah, the helmets are lighter. We also have something on the back of our head. It's called end device, and it's for preventing you from breaking your neck while you're in an accident. When I started, we didn't have that, but maybe 15 or 20 years ago, we started wearing those, which is very helpful because it's kind of important not to break your neck.
the first spaceship that I flew was Space Shuttle Atlantis, which is now in a museum, which, you know, is kind of, it's both lovely and a little bit ironic. But the Space Shuttle in the cockpit had 500 switches. And that's because it was such a primitive vehicle that, and the computers were so small. The computers that ran the Space Shuttle had 128K of memory. K. You know, that's like one crappy JPEG picture, you know. That all of the software to fly the Space Shuttle, because it was an old vehicle, had to fit in that tiny little bit of code. So that meant that in order for this machine to succeed, it required an enormous amount of human judgment, real time, and knowing which of the 500 switches you had to react with right now as things started to go wrong. The people that just landed from space yesterday, splashing down off the coast of Florida, that's flying in a vehicle that is essentially 100% automated. And to me, it is so much better because you can make it simpler. And when you can make something simpler, you have a greater chance of making it safer. You can optimize design. Take advantage of 60 years of invention and trial and error and loss of life and all the things that have brought you to where you are technology, and then integrate them into a new design, which then gives you a capacity for performance that was just unheard of when that first vehicle was built. And so I love getting into the cockpit of a space shuttle and looking around at the magnificence, but it also shows its age. And when you get into a vehicle like this one, it's the same thing as getting into an old car and then suddenly realizing, wow, think how this is going to change the driver experience, the whole transportation experience. It's true for spaceships, but it's true for a lot of vehicles like that beautiful one, your beautiful one here, right behind us.
I think, do you remember this?
Yeah.
And now in that video we saw, it's like this, right? You know, there's just, you know,
And
just,
gestures, yeah.
that's crazy.
Oh, I just want to say that the complexity of the interface, for example, is something that actually we're trying to remove the complexity and actually show you less information so that you're only presented with the information that you actually need at the time. And so through eye tracking and new technologies, you can do that things can move to the background. You show the driver what's important. The driver's going to be more focused, more safe, and again, a better experience.
Now, Chris, when you did your last mission in particular, I know you've been up 3 times, but you were really inspirational in inspiring a lot of younger people. You were tweeting, you were playing the guitar, singing us songs, chatting with school groups. Is this essential now for you to kind of give back and encourage, you know, innovation and performance in this younger generation?
In my own defense, we also set records for the amount of science done on the space station. On my very first space flight, digital film didn't exist. You couldn't take a digital picture. It was all like film cameras. And it's really hard to mass communicate with a film camera. And you take a great picture and it might be months before you ever see it. And then how are you going to take it to Australia and let somebody see this magnificent picture you took? So very much the ability to share human experience has been amplified and improved by technology. Now you can share an experience literally with 1 billion people. And it's accelerated our pace of awareness and invention. And so if you have a very unique experience, like winning how long ago did you win your last race? It was just a few months ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. In September.
In September. So, you know, we know theoretically that she won a race in September, but imagine the significance of it to have a camera in the cockpit, to have the reality of how it looks and feels real time. And then for what purpose, though? If you are a young girl somewhere else in Canada, to recognize this is something that's happening. I didn't even know this was going on, but this is a thing that people like me are doing. And maybe then I might make a different decision with my life because I'm more informed into the possibilities. And so as a very lucky Canadian who's, done spacewalks and commanded a spaceship, with incredible luck and privilege comes also great responsibility. And so I spend a lot of my time working directly with schools and writing books about it and teaching about it and making videos about it. And some people understand things better musically than any other way. You know how music just kind of gives you a feeling. Music can make you laugh or cry just like that. And so to be able to try and express the wonder of what I've done any way I possibly can, to me, I want to spread the joy of what I've been lucky enough to do. But also, I want young Canadians to see that this is just something you can do if you choose that this is where you want your life to go. We need that lure of the barely possible and the technology that enables us all to get there.
And Marnie, talk to me a little bit about what you're doing to give back, because you're a pretty strong advocate for helping these younger generation of athletes.
Yeah, so, and then with the athletes, it's exactly the same thing, that the message, when I was saying I was captain of swagger kind of thing, is that, it's normal people who are out there doing incredible things. And now as we're going forward, I think the evolution of athletes and the evolution of what we want from our athletes and from the people we're seeing perform is to know that they're not just like, Chris isn't just an extraordinarily smart man. He's so multidimensional. He's an advocate and an ambassador for so many things, the same as Valerie and Jason. And with our athletes, and we were really able to amplify this when everyone was home and communicating digitally through Zoom, how diverse our athletes are. And this is what made them stronger people and connect with us, is that we started, instead of asking our athletes to shush up and just be athletes, we were asking them to be true ambassadors and advocates for their communities. And this is sometimes in an activist kind of way. And instead of like saying, shh, 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 don't rock the boat, we're like, no, tell us about what's going on your boat or your ship or in your car. Tell us what's going on in your community. And so when Canadian athletes were organizing Black Lives Matter rallies, they were valedictorians of their virtual school programs. Like, we started.
I love seeing the families of the athletes and how did this person get to that platform in the world and meeting their parents virtually and seeing, how that all fit together. To me, it rather than just, okay, did they make it to the podium or not, it really helps see the human path by which you can accomplish something really amazing.
And this is what opens it up to the community, because they can go, well, that matters to me too. So I can speak out and I can use my position to tell other people that the path that they're on, the scary path, the path that isn't quite working yet, we can work together to make it better. And that this is one of the things I think there's the evolution of athletes in sport right now, is that they are telling us what's important to them, and that as leadership, we're taking that opportunity to amplify it and increase our caring.
Valerie?
Yes, so for me, there's not a lot of women involved in the racing, but I always take the time to talk to them. They write me on Instagram or Facebook, stuff like that. They even come to me at the racetrack so we can have a chit chat. And when I won the championship 2-3 weeks ago, I got an invite the following weekend to come to the karting track and check out the last race of the season. So I went, and it was really surprising for me to see all these young girls starting, and they all wanted to take a picture, and they were really happy for me as well. So it was really nice to see it's growing. So that's what we all want.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to ask each of you, before we wrap up, what's the best piece of advice that you heard from, a family member or friends or your coworker involving performance? Jason, you want to start us off?
Maybe. It's pretty funny, but one guy, when I started at Audi, and he was by far one of the best at drawing, and I asked him, I tried to probe him, how do you do it? What is the secret? What is your secret? And he said, you're thinking too much already. And for me, that really changed the way I was thinking. It's like, okay, so it's not about maybe trying to replicate what somebody else is doing. It's about me trying to look at my skill set and maybe just incrementally improve on what I have and not trying to be like somebody else.
Marnie?
Before a really big race, I was scared, and I thought I needed to not be scared or project that I wasn't scared to my teammates. And the advice, it was my rowing partner, Kathleen, she just told me she was scared too, and that normalized it. And we realized that fear and doubt are part of a champion's path. And so the presence of fear and doubt don't mean you're on the wrong path. They mean you care about the one you're on, and just be okay with it, and just kind of figure out how to move forward.
And I know you shared, you felt sometimes the imposter syndrome, which is hard to believe.
Yeah, just about always. I'm always waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and ask me for my invitation. Excuse me. How did you earn those titles? And we're like, who do you think you are? And I'm like, no, I took one step at a time, and I'm just normal me, and I think this is so cool to be here. But yeah.
Chris, your best piece of advice?
In all of our lives, there have been real highs and real lows. In everybody's life, bad things happen as well as good things. And what do you do when a bad thing happens? You know, we don't want it to happen, but it's inevitably going to be part of normal life. I was dreaming of being an astronaut. I was living in northern Quebec, up in near Chicoutimi, and late January 1986, when Space Shuttle Challenger came apart and killed everybody on board. And I thought, that's the end of my dreams. Like, there's no way, I'm nowhere near being an astronaut yet, and they just had a horrific bad thing happen. And I just thought, okay, I need to go to plan B or plan C or do something else. And I thought, well, I'll go be a airline pilot. You know, that's a good job, and I'm already a pilot. And my wife caught me going to airline pilot lessons, you know, to get my airline transport rating. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, well, shoot, you know, you're pregnant with our third child, and I'm never going to fly in space. And she said, don't you dare. Giving up on your dreams doesn't come for free. Giving up on your dreams has a cost. And recognize that. Dreams are super important in motivating you what you want to do every day. And just because you're at a low point or you think things are bad right now, that's not the right time to give up on your dream. Give it a chance. See what happens. You don't know what all the external recoveries are going to be like. Keep on changing yourself to keep working towards the things that you dream about. And it was a very pivotal moment, of course, in our lives. But I think about it often when I'm faced with something that just seems, you know, overwhelming. Recognize that holding on to the things that are important to you, keeping them as in the distance of what to decide what to do next. I think about my wife Helena's advice all the time.
That's great advice. And Valerie?
Yeah, so it came from my dad. When I started racing and karting at 12, the first race I remember I did was in Quebec City, and it was very competitive. We were like maybe 20 driver, and I came in like 15th place. I was very disappointed because at the practicing range, at the track, I was always fast, but then I start racing more professional, and I'm like 15, so I was pretty sad. So my dad is like, you know what? You always have to do a little bit more. So we were practicing every other day. We would go to the racetrack, buy tire, buy gas to put in the car. It was quite a lot of money at the time, and it still is. But yeah, so I was doing just a little bit more than everybody else. And at the end of the summer, I was the quickest, and then I moved to other categories and keep going. But just when you do a little bit more, sometime you want more than anybody else, then the result will follow.
Oh. This is fantastic. I've really enjoyed this, and I know we could have gone on another couple of hours. I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank our panelists today, Valerie, Chris, Marnie, and Jason. Just wonderful to hear your insights of innovation and where we're going in the future. So thank you very much.